In part one of this three-part series on how to solve quadratic equations, you learned about the method of factoring in the zero product property to find the solutions to this equation. However, sometimes factoring is not possible. So then in the second part, you learned about something called completing the square, where it allowed you to find the solutions whenever the quadratic was not factorable. However, this equation here, as you see it, is optimal because the number in front of x is an even number and it's only 1x squared. You can still use the method when it's an odd number in front of x or it's something other than 1 like 3x squared or so forth. However, it is really much more difficult. So there's a third method that you're going to be learning about today called the quadratic formula. Let's get it on! Let's go ahead now and take a look at the quadratic formula and how it works. One thing you should know before we get going is in order for the quadratic formula to actually work, you must have 0 on one side of the equation. And then the second thing that's really important to know is the quadratic formula always works. So unlike factoring the zero product property, sometimes you just can't factor, or sometimes it's inconvenient or more difficult trying to complete the square. This will always work. The formula is over here. It's x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So obviously this is a pretty complicated formula when you first look at it, but once you see how it works, trust me, it's really not too bad. So let's go ahead now and take a look at this equation. Whatever the coefficient is for x squared, in this case 3, that's what a is going to be. Whatever the coefficient is for x, that's going to be b, and the number here is going to be c. So in this case over here, a is going to be 3, b is going to be negative 7, and then finally c is going to be negative 5. So once you've identified what a, b, and c are, it's just a matter now of plugging them into the formula. So here's how it works. We have negative b, so that means we're going to take the opposite of negative 7. So x is going to equal 7, and then plus or minus square root. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take b and we're going to square it. Now what I prefer to do is actually just square it in my head. So I would take negative 7 and multiply it by itself. So negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. So I'm just going to go ahead and write 49 in here instead of writing negative 7 squared. And I'll show you why in a minute why I think it's pretty important to do it this way to avoid making mistakes. And then we write minus 4, and that means times 3, and then finally times negative 5. Then it's going to be all over twice a. Well, a is 3, so we're going to write 2 times 3. Okay? Then you're going to say x equals 7 plus or minus, and then in a minute you're going to go and take your calculator and try to multiply all this together and take 49 minus that product, and then it's going to be all over 6. Now let me show you what I would be doing on my calculator right now. So if I entered in 49 minus 4 times 3 times negative 5, you should get 109. So I'm going to go ahead and put 109 right there. The reason why I would multiply negative 7 times itself is when you try to square negative 7 on the calculator, if you're not careful, as you can see here, if you just put negative 7 squared, you're going to get 11, which is the wrong answer. Anytime you're going to be squaring a negative number, it's going to be positive. And in order for that to happen on the calculator, you have to put parentheses around the negative 7 like you see on this third line, and then you get the correct answer. Okay, so then once you have that, the final step is you're going to take 7 plus the square root of 109, and you're going to divide that by 6. And then also, you're going to take 7 minus the square root of 109, whatever the answer is, and divide by 6. So when you're done doing this, you should get approximate answers of about 2.91 and negative 0.57. Once again, though, let me show you how I would do this on the calculator. First of all, it's everything on top divided by 6. So what I like to do is I like to do this in 2 steps. 7 plus square root 109, get an answer. And then after I press enter, go ahead and press divide by 6. And then that's my final answer here. So that would round off to 2.91. If you want to do it in one step, you'd have to do it like this. Parentheses around 7 plus square root 109, end your parentheses, and then divide by 6. Like I said, I agree this is probably, in one step. For some people that's easier. I prefer it in two. To me, it's a little bit quicker actually because I don't have to worry about the parentheses. But no matter what, whichever way you choose, the correct answer is 2.91. And then just go ahead and do the exact same thing, but instead of a plus, you put a minus here. So it's 7 minus square root 109, and then divide by 6. If you like what you've seen and heard so far, please like, comment, or subscribe. Thank you, and back to the show. You're going to get the chance now to actually use the quadratic formula on your own, and then afterwards I will show you my solution. So the equation is x squared minus 8x plus 2 equals 4. And keep in mind, once again, this must be equal to 0. So you're going to have to figure out what to do to turn a 4 into a 0. Go ahead, pause the video, try this problem on your own. Great. Well, now that you've had the chance to actually solve this on your own, let me show you my solution. So what I did quickly at the beginning was I subtracted 4 on both sides. So then I wind up with x squared minus 8x minus 2 equals 0. Therefore, the coefficient for x squared is 1. So I have a equals 1, b would equal negative 8, and c would equal negative 2. Went ahead, plugged them into the equation here. So I have the opposite of b, which is 8. I'm going to go ahead and square negative 8. Well, negative 8 times negative 8 is 64. And then it's always minus 4 times a, which is 1. And then times c, which is negative 2, and then it's all over twice a, so that'll be 2 times 1. I went ahead, grabbed my calculator, and I took 64 minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. And if you did this correctly, if you follow the arrow up here, you'll see that x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 72 over 2. So that would be your exact answer. And then when I went ahead and got my calculator out and took 8 plus square root 72, pressed enter, and then divided by 2, I got 8.24, and then when I did the same thing but with a minus, I got negative 0.24. And that would be what's called your approximate answer. For a lot of teachers, especially at the very beginning, people are excited, you got this far, you have your exact answer. However, sometimes you're actually asked to take this square root 72 and to simplify it. So let me show you what that might look like. So if you follow the arrow here, the purple arrow down here, 72 can be written as 36 times 2. So why would you want to write it as 36 times 2? Well, the square root of 36 is 6. So we can take this and write it as 8 plus 6 times the square root of 2 all over 2. And then I went in and highlighted the 8, the 6, and the 2. You want to look at these numbers and see if there's a way to reduce them. Well, they're all divisible by 2. So if you divide the 8, the 6, and the 2 by 2, but not the square root of 2, by the way, but if you do that, you wind up with 4, 3, and 1. So our simplified root form for our exact answer would be 4 plus or minus 3 root 2. So that's it. That's how you do the quadratic formula. I realized at first that formula is a little crazy. It looks pretty intimidating. But I think now that you've had a chance to see how it works, it actually is pretty easy to do. Thanks for joining me.